So this is me, making a video record about a backtesting I did last weekend, right? Which end which end yesterday, which was Monday, right? So I just couldn't just clear off the chat like that. So I just had to really reflect on those on each trade and also the market structure, right? So I might not really take time to discuss brief about that. I'm just gonna just reflecting on the data and just seeing how this was me applying my age, how I understand the market, right? This was me applying my strategy on the chart and just seeing how it works and recording the result, right? So it's nothing fancy or biggie about it. It's just a clear review on what I did during my backtesting. Is right. I'm just selecting right, observing the high probability trade, how the structure, uh, how I would have react on the structures and what I would have do, and just me on this each position I'm placing here. As I said earlier, I really take time to really explain and study the price very well. I knew that what this should have been the right place to go in on the buy position, or this should have been the right place, and this is where it really plays out. And majority of this trade, you will see that before price really is my any of the point of interest, right? It has to grab liquidity, either grab liquidity or has liquidity above or below it, right? Like example of this stuff right here. This one we have a high, we have a low, right? And we have a recent breakup structure, right? But the major trend is bullish, is bearish, right? This is the major trend and the current structure we are trading within. This is the high and the low, right? And here is the internal structure. So the internal structure is bullish at this point, right? So there is nothing fancy or anything. I'm just, structuring and trying to really understanding the market and just, seeing how my age works with right? So it could, give me the confidence and the, to know that even in the future when I'm to take a trade, that I will know that I've seen this happening many times, right? I've seen this happening, and this is not the first time me doing back testing, right? I do forward testing. That was when my my trading view was on premium, right? I do forward testing, right? I do forward testing and take the trade nicely, and trust me, on those forward testing is different from these normal back testing, right? Forward testing is far different from normal back testing, right? For testing, you have to really, you don't know what will happen next, right? You just have to, all this will be, there won't be no chart to even try to, look out. What you would do is to just analyze your market and just be placing your trade, either price hit your SL or ETP. You just let it be and continue applying your edge, right, to see your win ratio and what. So this backtesting is just applying your edge to the market, right, like this. So okay, let me just break down one win right here, or let's say just four win. After this one, I'm not gonna do anything. I'm not gonna explain much again because I don't want this video to be much long. So what I'm about explaining here is about this four position. This one, two, three, and four position, and the reason, the my outlook of this point and why I got in on these two buy position, and this one why I got in on the on the sell position. Sorry. Okay. So as I said earlier, if you observe the trend, is the trend at this point is is very is heavily bearish, right? It's heavily bearish. Not notice how I start with the 5 minute time frame because I start this 5 minute time frame because this is my entry time frame and I'm doing back testing. Right, I can't, if I should start with 15 minutes, then mark out a zone comes out, I will always have to be, scrolling back, and some point the result, the data might not show due to limited, bar, limit limited bars, due to the limited bars I can see, which is only 5,000. So all those things it won't really make sense to be jumping from 15 minutes to 5 minutes. But since this 5 minutes is my entry time frame, right? So I'm just gonna be doing the analysis here and just going on the position, either long or short. So from this you can see we have a break of structure, we have a high and we have a low, high and low, which tells us that the trend is very. So what else are we gonna look out for at this point? Will be the internal structure. What the internal structure is clearly doing. So at this point, you can see the internal structure at this point was, bearish, right? Was bearish before. At some point, price, came down, find some demand at this point and start consolidating, liquidate this low. After that liquidation, we then see, and this is where I have the first internal shift, bullish shift, right? This is a clear and very nice liquidity grab at this point before price comes down. So if the internal structure should remain bearish, that's when you will see price just coming down, mitigate this block as a date, and just continue the bearish to break the swing range and just continue bearish. But at this point, the selling power at this point got exhausting, right? And price do what, start pushing up. So at some point, remember, this is during New York session. This is about 3 p.m. right, New York session, which I don't really take trade on during on New York session, right? I take trade on New York session, right? But once the time start, the day start running off, right? I tend to execute trade. I tend to execute trade from 8 p.m. to about 1 p.m. because this 1 p.m. The reason for 1 p.m. because it's a very active and overlap trading session, which we always know that there is always a high volatility in the market during this point. So at this point, this is London session, right? So what we see here is a clear, break is price, instead of maintaining this bearish move, the internal bearish move, what does price do? Price comes up, mitigate, react, find some supply at this point and just pulling back. Price has to liquidate this low, and after that liquidation, what happen? Price boom goes up, take out this high, give us a new high and low. That the internal structure, high and low, right there, right? So have the we have the I swing, internal structure I, and we have the low. And what happened? Price at this point, note that at this point, this is Asian session time, right? We don't trade Asian session. I don't trade Asian session, right? But due to the market structure at this point, you see how nicely price, retrace back to this sweep zone, this demand zone. After, coming to this demand zone, and trust me, at this point, I won't even be on the chart, right? I will only tend to analyze this price chart when I'm during my pre-market analysis, and that will be 7 a.m. in the morning. So I will really need to observe everything that was happening around this the around the Asian sessions and what happened yesterday too, right? So around this point, see how nicely price comes down to this demand zone. Price mitigation of that demand zone, price pushed up, comes down again. This demand zone already is a liquidity as grab liquidity, right? That demand zone has already grab liquidity very nicely before moving up. So it's a sweep zone and it's also a valid zone. So price coming down to that point, first mitigation goes up, second mitigation, liquidate the previous motivation and we start having this huge spike. That's when I just had to bring out the buy tools and learn. But trust me, I won't trade this session. I won't take this buy position because it's not during my trading range, right? If you look, this is about 6 a.m., right? It's 6 a.m. During this time, I may not be on chat, but it's still good to understand what happened at this point and understand what happened at that point, right? So what next, right? So we then have the huge push to the upside, right? And that push led price to mitigating this. There is a place I call resistance. You might see this resistance. That shouldn't have been a resistance. I don't trade support and resistance. That should be a breakout block, right? Not resistance, right? I should call that a breakout block, not resistance, right? Right. No resistance, right? But if you look at the market structure here, this is where price, comes and give us a break of structure. This is a clear, a clear retracement point that price could, possibly, pull back after breaking out of this consolidation. This is a clear point that price could, likely pull back and react before, you know, and retest, before continuing the bearish move, right? Right. So that's why I named that a resistance, right? Although it should have been a breakout block, right? Why do I call it a breakout block? Because it doesn't even lead to a breakout structure, right? Because at this point, this was where we have a shift in the market and price just, pull back to this sweep zone and mitigate that block before falling down and give us a low in high, right? I don't know if you guys understand what I'm analyzing, what I'm saying, right? What I'm saying. But this is my trading style, though, right? Right. So I was talking about the internal structure of that range. So what happened? Okay, during London session, okay, on after then, after price, mitigate this demand zone, that's where we start having this push up that cause price to, take out this high, right? And we still, price still encounter some resistance at this supply zone, right? Instead of taking this eye out and give us a new breakup structure, price just tend to find some resistance at this point, right? Supply at that point, which cause price, and this is when London session open, right? This is when London session open, and during the London session open, price just surge up and react on this block, give us equal high at this point. Trust me, I wouldn't in real time. I wouldn't care to take any buy position at this point. Any buy position at this point during this London session, even when I notice how that this price this at this point, even when I notice that at this point price gonna keep moving up to till it takes out of this high. But this is the origin starting point for price moving up. So I wouldn't dare to jump in at this point during the London during the London open and expect buy. And why? Because my risk to reward won't be nice. And second, it's not a high probability, spot. The right place I would have entered would have been at this, but it wasn't during my trading window. So what will I do? I will just expect price to, takes out this high first before I map out my demand zone and expect price to, pull back to it before start looking for the long position. And then what happens? We have London session open, goes up, give us equal low, comes down, react on this block and just move up again, react on this supply zone, then comes down. Coming down, that's where the major reason why I would go on this buy position would be that we have equal high at this point, right? We have equal high at that point, and we expecting price to take out that equal high and move down if it has to, or we expect that equal high to serve as an liquidity inducement, available liquidity, buy side liquidity for price to to just keep price going up even further, right? So at that point, since we have that equal high at this resistance zone, at that supply zone, you still I will confidently expect price to move. And where would I mark out my demand zone after knowing that this internal structure is bullish and what I'm looking out for is to go bullish, right? I know that this is where we have a liquidity point, and at this point we have institutional involvement. At this point we have a clear night zone at this point. So where would I place my entry? Where would I, marker? Where would be my point of interest? That would be this block, which I call BOB. Sorry, BBB, right? Which is breakout block, right? Right. So this is where and this is the block that led to price mitigation of this previous first mitigation, demand mitigation. And what happened? The price, comes back. And trust me, this wasn't during London session, right? This trade will happen during New York session, right? What happened here is that after during New York sessions open, price has been consolidated on the London session at this point, right? So during New York session open, price just tend to fall back to this BB block, right? The breaker block, right? That's where we have the mitigation of that block, and we start seeing price spike up. Trust me, I remember on this day Thursday, 12th Thursday, right? On Thursday, 12th February, right? I remember, taking few losses at this point, right? Or at this point because I was expecting price to, take out this equal high and continue going up. It was a bad experience, right? It was, after realizing what happened, what really angry, during my post market analysis and after realizing what was going on and understanding this market structure, what was going on, and seeing me, trying to, go on a buy position at this point, and my stop loss range was very tight, and it wasn't. I came to realize that it wasn't a high probability. It was just me trading my ego, trading my feelings because I've seen this equal high, and I was, really expecting price to take out that equal high. Then I wasn't that patient enough to just see how price would see price take out that equal high. The best thing I would have done at this point wouldn't have been to go in on a buy, right? It would have been to just stay out of the market. Already it wasn't my trading window and the time was even 3 p.m., which was out of my execution time, right? Right. So I wouldn't have even tried to, got in on that on any buy position at this point, right? But I took, few losses. I remember taking about many losses even on my live trading account and also even with my, personal, my brokerage funded account, right? I remember taking losses on this point, right? So it wasn't a really good experience, but after reviewing and understanding the market structure where price was, really coming from, like understanding, I realized that well, that was really good experience, right? Because I seen the error and knew my mistake, right? So the best trade I would have took would have been at this point, right? Would have been at this point. So let me just move on. So after then, what happened? We see price, consolidate range around this point. This is out of our trading time, right? Session, right? After then, see price range at this point and just boom comes down. Right, coming down, this zone was a valid zone because it grabs liquidity before mitigating this block. So if price were to remain bullish, price had to after taking out this high, liquidating this high, come down, price had to would have respect this block and just continue going up. But then what happened? Price just fall down and break, and that's where we have the market shift. Right? That's where we have the market shift, right? And this become a valid high, and this becomes the new low, right? So, so another thing you would like to say is that already the internal structure is bullish, which is this, and we have this high and this low. Why do we have this market shift inside the internal structure again, right? That's where you also need to understand that a shift could happen within a fractal structure, right? A structure within an internal structure is fractal, right? It's fractal, it's very fractal. That's when you will need to, go down to 1 minute time frame to see it really bold and clear, right? So one thing you also need to understand is about the fractal structure within the internal structure. So everything that happens inside within this structure, right, inside this highs and low, right, is considered to be fractal. So at this point, the fractal structure has signal a shift, which also means that it could clearly affect the internal. It would clearly cause the internal structure to also shift, bearish, right? So it might not happen quickly, right? It might not just happen very fast, right? It's based on session, right? Days will come and price even tend to range within the box, right? So you, for instance, you were expecting, let's say you were expecting price to, until price takes out this low before you know that the internal structure have shifts to bearish, which align with the swing structure. But since while you are still waiting for price to, you ignore that, forget that the inside this structure has a fractal structure which has signal a bearish, and there is still a high chance that price could shift on a bearish inside the fractal structure, push back up and mitigate the resistance zone. Why will I say, why am I keep mentioning resistance? Mitigate the supply zone and just fall back down. And that fall back could cause price to, really collapse heavily. Trust me, I've seen it happen many times, right? So, so let's just, move into, so let's just move it, right? Let's just continue with the chart. So internal, after having that, fractal market shift, that's where we start. We know that we have a shift here, right? And this is where we have the supply zone that caused the market shift. And this supply zone was, there was a consolidation at this point. So there was a consolidation at this point, at this price point, right? There was a consolidation which, before price, break out of it, right? So which then clearly tells us that price at this point, uh, there is an order at this point, lot of orders at this point that price will later in the future, come back and fill that order before we start, having that bearish move to the downside. So let's just observe this was out of our trading window, right? So we waiting for the next trading day now, right? So this was during Asian session, right? And this is London session. So this was Thursday, and now we are waiting for Friday, right? So let's say we come on Friday. Now I believe you understand why I got in on that buy position, right? Based on the the bullish structure range, right? Right. And trust me, this trade might end up eating stop loss. But trust me, in real time, during this consolidation would have, really, makes me know that at this with this huge consolidation, price has a high chance of falling since the major trend is bearish, and there is still enough selling power in the market. So at this consolidation range, trust me, I would have just end this long position at that point, even though price doesn't move to my full tip 1:4 is to reward, right? But I've just closed that trade, right? So let's just move forward. So at this point, that we see price break out of this the internal range. Now we have the internal range shift bullish shift bearish now, give us a bearish side now, and this bearish also align with a swing structure, which tells us that the which this bearish move, which also align with the swing structure, which tell us that the pullback is over. The price at this point has a high chance of just continue going down over. The price could continue the make continue start making the continuation move, right? And so what happened, since we have the internal structure bearish, which align with the swing structure, then and the fractal structure is bearish. So what we will do now, let's say on Friday, because this is Friday now, what I will do now is to mark out my swing internal swing highs and low, then which will be, this is where we have the market, mitigate the supply zone, the demand zone, range comes, mitigate this block, range before we see the fall. So this here is a flip zone, right? This year is a becomes an interesting zone, right? Areas we could expect price to, after making this, to pull back to before we have the bearish move, So what am I doing on Friday, doing my pre-market analysis? I remember this day, right? It was after this trading day which I took few losses, and on the next day, which was Friday, and I remember clearly, due to the due to my due to few losses I took. I think these losses I took on Thursday really traumatized me. Like, I was really feel tired because throughout the new year, throughout January, start of this year, I've been in a very huge, like, I've been having a setback, right? I've been having a setback. So price has been, just, I've been just, having a setback and just having a bad time, taking losses, and it was all full of experience. So this day really, made things very hard for me. I was very down at this point, right? I was very, dramatized, like, due to the losses I made. So waking up the next day, I was like very tired. Even though I come up on chart and did my normal pre-market analysis, and you know I really marked out this supply zone and marked out this low, and I knew that clearly that the trend at this point, I know that the trend was bearish at this point. I had to, mark out the highs and low, and just mark out the supply zone. This was the zone I marked out, right? And I first, during that pre-market analysis, I was to place a limit sell limit order at this point, right? At this point, right? Because I knew that price this point has the potential of holding price down, right? I was to place a limit order at that supply zone, at that extreme supply zone, right? But I couldn't, like, I wasn't really serious on that Friday, right? My mind was, I was still feeling the losses I had on the previous day, right? So I was kind of like, I was kind of like feeling very tired, and like, it was just psychological, like, somehow to me, right? It was just because I wish I was on the zone, right? I would have, take this, place this limit order, this sell position, and just expect anything to happen, either price, because even though my age really was really present at this point, the only thing that was left for me was to, take that action, push, set the orders, and just, see what price will do. But I wasn't able to set the order during my pre-market analysis. when I under when I analyze everything and expect price to pull back to this point. I was, consciously, I was really logically, like, I was, I was, like, let me place the sell limit order on this demand zone, right? Because I've seen the potential of that. I've seen a, I've seen that it's a high probability zone. right? But somehow I was like, let me wait for confirmation and stuff like that. So I end up not, taking any action on that day. But I remember going out with the guys just to, clear up my mind and and that was at during this point, right? During London session, right? So this happened during New York session. So during London session, I wasn't really, of course, like I said earlier, my mind on this day wasn't really settled on the chart. Even though I came up and do my normal pre-market analysis, I wasn't able to take any trade or doing anything due to my prior experience, and I let that, get into me, and I was feeling very tired. Right. So this was a back test, anytime I do back test and come across a chart that I've experienced in real time and I've learned a hard lesson from it, it's very hard to forget that setup, right? That caused me that some pain, right? It's always very hard to, forget that setup. So I would like to, talk more about it to, you know, try to, brief again how I felt during that day. Right. So it was during this, backtesting was when I tend to realize that during London session at this point would have got a very clear entry at this point, which would have been the this buyer position on during London session, right? But it was during this, um practicing that I knew that I would take this very nice sell buy position at this point and drive price to the upside. Okay, so I will just enough of all that, right? Let's just focus then. So the next day now we have the high and low, and we expecting price to maybe pull back. uh, and we have these Asian sessions, right? So what I will expect at this point will be a price taking out the Asian. I have my supply zone marked out, right? So what I see here was price, pulling up, giving us a fractal sheet, and after then, let me just after giving us the market sheet, already we have this, respect of this supply zone right here that, tend to sellers tend to comes in, and that's why we have this little consolidation around there at some point because there was still an active buyers in the market. They move price up again and break this high, right? That's where I have because if you look the left hand side, there is no clear supply zone at this point. So all these are just liquidity points. Right, so having price break out of this point signal that there is enough buying at the in the market, right? So this below this lies an inducement by the pending stop loss or those that trying to like jumping on a buy, their stop loss will be there, right? So what happened next? Price just made it pull back down, right? Liquidate that low, right? Liquidate this low, right? And mitigate this demand zone. After that mitigation, we start having this consolidation. Trust me, if I was actively on chart, I will, go in on a long position at that point, and my target will be above the Asian session, and that would have been about 1 to 9 weeks to that's crazy. Uh, so that would have been the trade I would have do, and this is the reason why I play this, buy position too, right? So and then you clearly know about the resistance, the supply zone. I keep mentioning resistance, the supply area. The trend was bearish and price made a deeper pullback. This happened during New York session. Price made a deeper pullback, mitigate that supply zone. How we should use a pending order, right? A sell pending order, right? You would have catch this move. You would have catch that sell move. Right. I still remember jumping in at this point that day. Right. Jumping in on a sell at this point and expect price to just keep going down. But I end up taking loss on that too. Right, because price goes against me again and hits my result, which was just above the high. Which was just above that high. Right. So it was also a nice experience, and the sell I took there was kind of like FOMO trade, and but technically I know that the market gonna still move down. That's why I jumped in. I got in on the sell at this point, and price was up 1:3 weeks reward, but I was expecting price to just blow down and keep going. And what happened? Without even bringing my SL to break even, price just move against me and ate the SL. And I got out on loss that day too, instead of taking the real trade and this one. Right. So that's it. Alright. So that's it about this. That's it about this four trade now. So enough of that, right? So enough of that, right? So I'm just gonna be, just scrolling and be observing the market structure and what I did during the back testing, right? Which is, we have the next day, which was Monday. What happened? We just That's it, right? I'm tired already, and this video is almost more than 1 hour or even maybe less, right? So enough of talking, just observe, just look the chart and just learn something if you can. Right. Mhm. This is how I do my market, my analysis, and this is how I understand. I understand the market structure. Then you can see my analysis. You really, if you are a person that really understand market structure very well and observing where how I'm marking out the structure, you then realize, and you also learn something from this, if not from what I'm saying, but just studying the chart. I know market structure price come break this one. No, not even break. Right. This block has fell already. Right. So it's a weak block. I'm tired already. So I was to clear off this chart and just start my my daily analysis, and just today I did not today is 10 March, right? 10 March, today Tuesday, 10 March, right? So I did not, because I summarized this back testing yesterday, right, which was Monday, and this takes me about 4 days, right? 4 days, right? So I summarized it yesterday, so I couldn't just clear up the chat like that. I had to, try to do some video just reflecting on those chats, right? I couldn't just, start my new trading day, right? I just have to reflect on those chats to, learn something and record it very well so I can post it out there for you guys to also learn, just see how I do my, my back testing. So you too can also do that on your own too, right? So this is how I do my back testing. Trust me, there are more to this, right? I have more because I've been doing. I always do back testing very often, right? I always tend to do back testing and just refining and seeing how I understand the market more to, really, you know, have a mental image of my my edge, right? So just to play around with backtesting a lot and just reflecting on my result and my actual result and everything, right? So I'm gonna post this video on my YouTube page, and I'm gonna post this video on my YouTube page and also on my X account, so you guys also tend to just watch it, and just if you have a comment, just drop it out just drop it. It will be anyhow, anything you have in mind to comment on this. Just have your bring in your thought. Bring in your comment your thought, how you feel I should, the how you feel the back testing should, I should do the back testing and not what I'm doing now, right? Of course, we all have opinion, we all have reason to, trust me, I know what you're thinking now. This guy have been doing back testing, no loss on those back testing. Like I said before in the beginning of this video, that I'm not here to see if my trade failed, if my edge has losses or not. I'm here to apply only high probability where I see price, playing out, and just try to understand what price did at that point, the reason why price did what it did, right? And that's just that, right? So, all right. So that's it, right? And see, this is it now. This is the current market now. So this will be the end of this record, right? You can drop your comment and just trust me, if you learned something from this video, you just still drop a comment, right? Still drop a comment, right? That will be the end of this record, right? All right, guys, have a nice profitable week. It's Marble Forex.